Good morning. I am glad you are here. I am glad to see you. I'm going to talk this morning about raising your Ebenezer. Raise your Ebenezer. And it's all part and parcel, I think, of what God has been speaking to us over the closing out of the summer. This is the first Sunday of fall, by the way, if you noticed. Got a little chilly at night for the first time, and I don't know. But I was noticing over the summer, as we were hearing the word being brought forth to us on Sunday, there's like these certain things I want to put in order as things I've been noticing and sensing. And it was Eric, I think, who was first in this flow that I'm looking at, and he brought a word that said, "You are saved for a reason, and you are called to a purpose." And then he said, "Be sure." And I thought, not very poetic or explanatory. And the "be sure," it's like there is a certainty you need to have that causes you to act out of that certainty. The way you behave is based on the confident knowledge that you have that you are saved for a reason and called to a purpose. Be sure. And then Canon House brought a word saying, those things that ensnare you and trip you up have been broken. They've been cut away. Your chains are broken, the snare is broken, and you are free. And then Deacon Jesse brought this word about get out of Egypt, right? Get out of Egypt. Now, it's easy. That's what I say, get out of Egypt. But it's complex. And it's more than just a historical lesson. It's a historical lesson that teaches us something about, we live in a world that even though God has broken those chains, wants to tangle us up again. Tangle us up in the ideas of Egypt. False gods, mistakes, terrible, not us, slavery. And we're called to be free. And we need to get out of Egypt. And it's complicated. And what I want to add to that is raise your Ebenezer, which, of course, I have to explain that. You may have heard me explain it before. There was a song that I heard several years ago, and it's an old hymn that had been popularized again. In the middle of it, they said, "Raise your Ebenezer." And my first thought is, what is my Ebenezer? I don't know what that is. So how can I raise it? And so Deacon Johnson was there, and he explained that it's like a banner or a rock. Literally, it means rock of saving, or this is the rock of my salvation, the saving rock. And you raise it up as a pillar. And so that's what I want to talk about, how we do that. And it's like that's the next step, in my view, thinking about these things. But I want to just briefly mention the readings that we just listened to, because there's a theme in them, several themes in them that's reaching out to us and telling us where to put your trust. Where do you put your trust? And it's like, well, here's a list of things not to trust. Don't trust your wealth or your riches. Don't trust in some noble person. You have to put your trust in God. And you have to know that there will be a day when there will be a reckoning. I mean, it's kind of scary in the readings, because there is that, I think one of the Amos reading is it will be the day of doom. It's like, okay, don't like that. Don't like, thumbs down. What do I do? It's like you have to know who you're going to trust. And I want to call out something here to make my point about this, or to begin this story. And that is in the Psalm. In the Psalm, it starts out and says, praise the Lord, O my soul. While I live, I will praise the Lord. I will sing praises to my God while I have my being. And it says, do not put your trust in princes, nor in a son of man, in whom there is no help. His spirit departs and returns to earth, and that very day his plans perish. And then it says this, happy is he who has the God of Jacob for his help. Happy are those who have the God of Jacob as their help. And so I read that and I thought, you know, I've heard this characterization. It's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know, the God of Moses. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the most common one. But what are they talking about? Happy are those, or blessed are those, who have the God of Jacob as their help. Well, I know, because we've studied, we were just talking about Egypt and all those things. I know that when we look at Jacob, we have some stories. I want to tell about those stories. And his son Joseph is far more prominent. And having studied and been taught, it's like I understand that Joseph is a type of Christ. He is a type of Christ. It's like there's an example like that. He lives in riches with this robe. He's thrown in a pit. He's sold into slavery. He ends up in prison, and then he becomes the prime minister of Egypt and saves the world during a famine. Saves everyone. It's like that's a type of Christ. What I say, in comparison, that Jacob is a type of me. Fair, right? A type of me. Probably a type of you too. He was ordinary and a little sneaky. His name meant supplanter, cheater, manipulator guy. And so it sounds familiar. I shaved that guy. I know who we're talking about. And I want to talk about certain important moments in his life, beginning with when he is running away from his brother in fear of his life, and he has a vision of a ladder that goes from heaven to earth. And it's remarkable. And I'm hoping you know these stories, right? Why is he there and why is he running for his life? Well, because he has manipulated his brother out of his inheritance and out of his blessing. He's a rat, and he's running away for his life because his brother has promised that as soon as his father has died, as soon as the days of mourning are over, he's going to kill him. And the thing is, if you know anything about these families, it's a legit promise. You can, the guy's not making that up. They're rough, tough people. Esau is. And so he's running for his life. And it's, I'm going to give you the readings here so you can see them. It's in Genesis 28. He's running for his life, and he goes out. He's alone. He goes to sleep, puts his head on a rock, and he has a dream. And in Genesis 28:12 it said, "And he had a dream, and behold, a ladder was set up on earth, with its top reaching to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord was standing above it and said, I am the Lord your God, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give you and your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and in your descendants shall all of the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Jacob has just received, he tricked his brother out of the inheritance. He tricked his dad out of the blessing. But how did he trick God out of the promise? I don't think he did. God knew what he was doing. But that's the guy that God said at that moment, you're the one. First there was Abraham, and I gave him the promise for his descendants. And then there was Isaac, and I gave him the promise. And then there's you, and I'm giving you the promise. You're the one, the inheritor of the promise of God. Now, this is amazing, right? That's why I don't mind being like Jacob, because seems like a good promise to get, right? And that vision. He stood in a place, imagine this, where he saw a place where heaven and earth touched through this ladder. And as they touched, there were messengers, angels of God. They were bringing the word to him and the world. And messengers of God taking the prayers up into heaven. And over this place stood God, giving him the promise. Can you even imagine a place like that anywhere? Okay, it's not a subtle point I'm making. But it's iconic moment. It's telling us something. This is important. This is an important place. This is an important place where God is interacting with us. This is Jacob. This is the God of Jacob. How does Jacob respond? How awesome is this place? It is none other than the house of God. And this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob got up early in the morning and he took the stone on which he had placed his support for his head. He had the rock for a pillow. Poor planning on his part. He took this rock and he set it up as a memorial stone. He set it up as an Ebenezer. He raised his Ebenezer. This place matters. He poured oil on its top. That's an image of he's making a sacrifice. Oil is something you would rather keep. It's valuable and important, but he's pouring it out as an offering. It's a sacrifice he's making. And he called the place Bethel, which just means house of God. And he said, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take and give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone, which I have set up as a memorial stone, will be God's house. And of everything that you give me, I will assuredly give you a tenth. He's not asking for much. Food, clothing, live in safety, and bring me back to my father's house. This has changed Jacob. This is something new. And he goes, and I want to talk about this because there's this arc of this story that's going on. If you'll bring me back to my house of safety, and if you keep me safe, then you'll be my God. And he goes and he lives with his uncle Laban. And his uncle Laban is a lot like Jacob. And he's always trying to get one over on Jacob. But God keeps blessing him and blessing him and blessing him until such time as Jacob knows he has to go. And he sneaks away. He sneaks away in the night, takes all of his family, all of his flocks, all of his people, and they run away. And Laban is not happy. And he's running after him, and he's going to get him. And I want to read this one verse before I talk about the next moment. The next moment we want to get to with Jacob is when he wrestles with God. He sees this ladder leading up to heaven, and then he wrestles with God. But on the way there, he's leaving with all of his family, and Laban is coming after him. And just one verse, Genesis 31:24, it says, then God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream at night. Wow, who's this guy? He's getting God as a vision, a dream at night. And he says, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, good or bad. So God goes to Laban and says, back off, right? Now I'm thinking, happy are those who have the God of Jacob as their help. That's awesome. God is taking care of Jacob. And they make peace, and he goes on his way, and he's going back. Jacob is going back to where his brother lives. And he's not reconciled with his brother. He left under threat of murder. And he's going back there because God told him to. He's following God's plan. He's going there. He doesn't know what to expect. The first thing he hears when he sends out messengers to tell Esau he's coming, is that Esau is on his way to meet him, coming with 400 men. Wow, yeah. Let's just say that's not a potluck. That's a cavalry battalion. He's coming, and that's a threat. That's scary. And it's at that context where Jacob sends all of his people across the river, and he stays alone. And he wrestles with God. And that's in Genesis 32, starting in verse 22. In verse 24, it says, so Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. This was a crisis in Jacob's life where he was following God's plan, and he was afraid because there was a legitimate threat against himself and all his people. And in that moment, he is in a place where, you see, he wrestles with this person. And it comes to light afterwards that he's wrestling with God. He's wrestling with him all night, and nothing, it's like neither one of them could overpower the other. But Jacob would not let go. And the man says, let go of me. And he said, not until you bless me, which is fascinating. So I want to mention that in particular because there will come times in your life where God will ask of you, require of you something difficult, hard, threatening, scary. And you will wrestle with God. Are you kidding me, God? If I beat you in a wrestling match, can I get out of this? Well, here's my advice. Don't let go. Don't let go. That's how it ended. He wouldn't let go. Jacob wouldn't let go. Bless me, or I will not let you go. And so he changed his name. 32, verse 28. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with man and have overcome. You have wrestled with God and man, and you have overcome. Your name is Israel. You are the one who wrestles with God. Interesting. That is the name of God's chosen people for a long time. Those who wrestle with God. That's us. We do too. We wrestle with God. But I want to point out his name change is important here because of the next story. And he says of that place, he called it Penuel, which means because I saw the face of God, and yet my life was spared. He called it the place, the face of God. Now, what happened? That was at the moment Esau is coming with 400 people, 400 men, a cavalry battalion. But when he arrives and he sees Jacob, they reconcile with each other. There is a reconciliation. He has stepped out in faith in what God was doing, and God has watched over him, and he brought peace between those two. Now, Jacob at this time has given Esau a lot of goods, herds and flocks and things like that. And Esau was like, I don't need those things. I'm fine. I have all the stuff. And Jacob was like, no, I'm asking you to do this for me. I need to do this. He's making restitution. It's like it's at the moment of peace with Esau, and he wants to make restitution for what he's done in a context of this whole arc of this story when he left. When he left, he saw a ladder, and he cheated Esau. And when he came back, he's making peace with Esau by making restitution with him. And that's important. And that peace, think about the ability to make peace. It's a hard thing. Happy are those who have the God of Jacob as their help. Jacob is benefiting from the help of God in all these steps. And I want to finish this arc of this story of Jacob with this final story. And it is, it's out of Genesis 35. And at the end of Genesis 34, he's living in this place next to the city, and there is a severe conflict of cultures between these two people that resulted in, it's described as a rape, an assault on one of Jacob's daughters by one of the princes of this city. And this young guy is madly in love with this girl and has behaved improperly toward her from a culture that saw that as normal. But he's in love, and these two cultures are in conflict, and they negotiate a peace between them in that this other people have to come into the ethos of Jacob and his people, and all the men have to be circumcised. And the whole city says, okay, we'll do it. There's this peace, this thing that they're going to make out of this horrific event. And yet what happens is that all the men are suffering from the after effects of the circumcision, and two of Jacob's sons kill them all and take all their stuff. It's like, these guys are rotten. And they do this terrible thing, and Jacob is dumbfounded. You who brought trouble on me by making me odious, obnoxious, I think it says. I always thought odious. Maybe it's smelly. Obnoxious to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. It's like, you have ruined us all by what you've done. And God gives him a word. Gives Jacob a word. At this moment, again, another crisis in his life. And what does he say? He says, go to Bethel. Go to Bethel. Go to the place where you set up that Ebenezer. You set up your stone. So he does. And it says in verse 5 of Genesis 35, it says, then they set out, Jacob and all his people. And the terror of God fell on the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. Happy are those who have the God of Jacob as their help. The danger he was in, God was intervening. And I think that for us, how many times I know in my life that the God of Jacob is working in the world where I'm not, taking care of things that are a threat to me. And I'm grateful. Happy. Happy are those who have the God of Jacob as their help. So he goes and he comes to Bethel, where he built the altar. And God appeared to him again and blessed him. I'm looking at verse 10. And God said to him, your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named it Israel. Now, I want to point that out because we talked about it when he wrestled with God. God changed his name to Israel. And now he's in this crisis caused by the culture class with the city he was near, his children. The world wants to destroy him. And he changes his name again. It's where you wrestle with God. It's where you set up your stone. This is where I will stand. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. Your nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. And the land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you. And I will give you this land to your descendants after you. Then God went up to him from the place where he talked with him. Now that is like at the ladder. Not only like where he wrestled with God, but like at the ladder. God is bringing Jacob through his whole life. He's walking with him. He's watching out for him. He's guiding him. He's directing him. He's helping him. That's the God I want as my help. That's the God I want as my help. And what does Jacob do? He set up a pillar of stone. He wanted to mark that place. This is the place where I know I can find God, where he will speak to me, where I can lift up my prayers to him, where whatever is going out in the world, I know this is the place that I can stand. This is the place where I can be certain and I can act out on that certainty. Know that God saved me for a reason. He called me to a purpose. That he has set me free from the bonds of slavery and that I can get out of Egypt. I don't have to be troubled by the bad ideas in the world. I can raise my Ebenezer, and here I can stand. He set up a pillar, a place where God talked with him, and he poured out a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. All these sacrifices that he makes. Jacob called the place where he talked to him Bethel, the house of God. God has given us a pillar where we go to make our stand, to say, this is what I believe right here, right now, over and over again. Jacob came back to Bethel in a crisis. We need to always come back to Bethel in a crisis. And that is that place where we meet with God, where we trust him. As every day we live from that place, knowing that God will speak to us, watch over us, and care for us, even in ways we don't see. Because he saved us for a reason. He called us to a purpose. He knows we're not in a trap. We've been set free. He knows we got no reason to live in slavery in Egypt because we have set up our pillar. We have poured out our oil on it. And this is where we're going to stand. So you've been saved for a reason, called to a purpose. The snare is broken. And now is the time to get out of Egypt. Not easy. Sacrifices will be made. And now is the time and the place where we raise our Ebenezer, where we make our stand. And that is why this morning, I am glad you're here. And I am glad to see you. Here ends the lesson.